Hey everyone, it's T and welcome back to my channel. So for this video we're going to talk about Tyler Perry and A Fall from Grace. A Fall from Grace is his latest Netflix project. So it was released January 17, 2020. It's got a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb, 22% on Rotten Tomatoes as well. Everyone's been lighting up the movie. It's just bad, honey. It's just bad. It's just really bad. But before we talk about the movie, I want to talk about kind of what's been going on with Tyler Perry first. So before the new year started, he had tweeted out a video of him surrounded by piles and piles and piles of scripts as kind of like a motivator. It was supposed to be one of those motivational videos that was like, yeah, hustle hard, grind, y'all. And it kind of fell flat. Because in the video, he was basically like, I don't have a writer's room. I wrote all these myself. This is a work ethic. And a lot of people felt some type of way about that. I originally made like a video about all this, but I decided to scrap it. But the reason I'm releasing a video now is because the conspiracy theorist in me thinks that all of this was somewhat intentional. Just the timing of it. Now, you can say it was supposed to be inspirational, supposed to get people to be like, oh yeah, in 2020, I'm gonna be on my grind. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna be just like Tyler Perry. But I think he intentionally did this to get people to talk about him and the movie. Because conveniently, the buzz around him not having a writer's room and just writing for himself conveniently coincided with the movie releasing in a few weeks. I think if there wasn't this kind of controversy around it, not nearly as many people would have watched the movie. I honestly think it's kind of sad that he doesn't really have a writer's room except for himself. He did mention in another interview after all this came out that he did have a writer's room at one point, but it wasn't a good situation for him. He had a dip in the ratings. People weren't responding to it like he wanted them to. He basically said that the audience knows his voice and they want to hear his voice. But he does have other projects coming up, which he will have different writers, different voices for those projects. But here's the thing of it. This is why we haven't really seen growth from Perry, not only as a writer, but really as a director, because he's got no one around him but himself to kind of draw ideas from, to give a differing perspective. It's all his perspective. That can be not the best, to be honest. He's put some pretty problematic things in his movies, like, dark-skinned guys essentially being the devil. The lighter-skinned guy is there to save the day. If you don't believe in Jesus or put your faith in Jesus, then things aren't going to work out for you. So there's all kinds of problematic messages. For his depiction of black women, they're either kind of battered and bruised and poor, or they're either bougie and stuck up. Women are more dimensional than that, particularly black women. So to just kind of portray not only black women in that way, but then, black men as, oh, if you're dark skinned, in most of his movies, you're the bad guy. If you're a lighter skinned guy, you're the pits. There's other movies where the woman doesn't believe in her man's dreams, and because she doesn't believe in her man's dreams, she does fucked up shit, and then the man ends up moving on and being happy, and her being with nothing. And if she'd have just stuck with that man who had his dream, then by golly, she would have had it made. Like, it's all just silly. And particularly now that he's making a show centered around black women. I think it's called Sisters. And there's no black women in his writer's room. Or there not even being a writer's room. It's kind of problematic. Because it's not a true portrayal of black women. Because there's no black woman voices in there. It's just his voice. It's how he sees black women. And that's a problem. But the whole thing coming out of him not having a writer's room and him being unbothered by people's criticisms I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me. And you also have to wonder, like, why? Like, yeah, he gave that flimsy little excuse that, oh, well, the ratings dipped. It didn't work out. You had to pay them to rewrite something if you didn't like it. And I had to pay them to write it in the first place. So it's just easier to do myself. Like, no. It just comes off as egotistical and greedy. And when you learn about the production of A Fall from Grace and just watching A Fall from Grace, that ego and that pride and that greed, it just really kind of shows. So let's go ahead and talk about the movie. It's a train wreck. I don't even know where to start. I guess we can start with the fact that apparently this was all shot in 5 days. 5 days. And it clearly shows. There's boom mics in the scenes. Sometimes there's extras drinking air, not looking or eating at their food, looking directly at the camera. Like, it's nuts. Like, there's this one scene where Shannon, that's the character's name, Shannon, he takes the main lead, Grace, to a diner, and they're supposed to be having this little date. And, like, the extra is looking, like, directly at the camera. Like, they're in this diner, like, drinking air. It's just a mess, y'all. The wigs are terrible. The hair situation is bad. And there even came out where, I believe it was in an interview, where the lead actress who plays Grace, who also played Luann in The Heat of the Night, this was her first major role, but she said that, you know, she was kind of beefing with Tyler about the way the wigs look, saying that for black women, hair is a very important thing, which is true. Black women, our hair is very important. So for that not to be on point and having like to fight for better hair is insane. Basically, Tyler was like, oh, well, that should be figured out before you get on set. Like, no, dude, like, you should have a department dedicated for hair, makeup, what have you, to make sure all your actors and stuff ain't out here looking a mess. To make it look like it wasn't just recorded for like a YouTube video. The cinematography was bad. It was just a mess, y'all. If you watch the movie, it's kind of like looking for Easter eggs about all the bad mistakes. There's this one scene where there's no excuse for it, but the guy, which I'll explain the movie in a little bit, but the lead guy, Shannon, played by Cad Brooks, he takes Grace to like this little field, and there's supposed to be fireflies, but there's nothing there. It's just like dark in a field. And so he spins her around with her eyes closed, and suddenly these bad After Effect fireflies show up, and then they don't even stay for the whole scene. Like, it's madness. Like, the shitty level of production that was involved there. And the plot is no better. So, in the opening, we get this old woman. She's on an edge of the roof, and a cop's trying to talk her down, and she's going, oh, he was supposed to be my husband. He was supposed to love me. We were supposed to be partners. And the cop is trying to talk her down, and a helicopter flashes, and he's like, no, get that helicopter out of here. And she ends up like just jumping, and you know it's supposed to be one of those emotional oh shit scenes, but it didn't go that way because it was just shot so poorly. Like, it just seemed like something cheap, like something like a YouTuber could do. No shade to YouTubers, because some YouTubers really be putting in work, but I'm just trying to say that it was just really bad looking. And it was more like, oh, well, that's a start. Cop goes home to his wife, who's a lawyer. She works in a public defender's office, and on her way to the office, you hear about this woman named Grace Waters, who was arrested for allegedly killing her husband. Turns out that the wife, I think her name is Jasmine in the movie. I'm not 100% sure. Honestly, it kind of doesn't matter. We'll just call her Lawyer Girl. But I think her name is Jasmine. But just to be safe, lawyer gets into the office. Now, the whole time I'm thinking that this is about the lady that jumped. I'm like, maybe she survived. Maybe she didn't, like, fall to her death. Because, honestly, the building that she jumped from didn't seem that high. I thought maybe 3-4 stories at most. I'm like, maybe she survived and this is about her being arrested. Nope. Turns out it's a completely different lady. And lawyer is supposed to go plead her out. Because that's apparently what she does. She just pleads. Tyler Perry is apparently the head of the public defender's office, and he's like, you go out there, you talk to her, you get her to sign this plea deal. She goes out there to talk to her, and gets her to sign the thing, but during a meeting, she sees that old girl is crying, and apparently, lawyer never seen nobody that's guilty cry, so she's like, you know what, I'm gonna try this. Please tell me your story. Grace tells her about how, at the insistence of her friend, she meets this dude at this art gallery. He's a photographer or what have you. He ends up finding her, chasing her down after the show, after she abruptly leaves, and tries to get her on a date, tries to woo her. The guy is Mashad Brooks. His name is Shannon in the story. She's kind of skeptical, Grace. She's like, what does this young fine thing want with me? And to be honest, like, the costuming is so bad. Like, Mashad Brooks is fine. This is a super sexy man, and you got him looking like he walked out of 1994. It kind of reminded me of, if you guys have ever watched Waiting to Exhale, Troy, couldn't remember the name for a minute. The dude that took her to that one party, and he was doing cocaine and shit, and then where they had the little scene where she's on the balcony and they're fucking throwing oranges back and forth, like, that was his character design. It was really bad, but anyway, back on track. So, the two are courting and dating, and he finally convinces Grace to marry him. Grace has this good job, and she's a very successful woman, but all the time she's like, why would he want me? Like, I'm old, and Grace isn't that old. She's like in her 50s, she's divorced, she's clearly got a good job, she's divorced, but, you know, who cares? Like, a man her age, or even like a man a little younger would be into that. It's not like she's old and ugly and boring. I mean, she is a little boring, but a man her age would want her, so I don't understand why she was walking around like, no one will ever love me, I'm too old. But anyway, he gets her to marry him, and then after that, shit changes up real fast. He starts being a little defensive about her calling him out about people he's talking to late night on the phone. And then she's suddenly called into the office at work, and it's like, hey, you're fired. You were embezzling money in these accounts. Goodbye. You've got 24 hours to give us back the money. She's surprised Pikachu facing. The whole time when she's chilling with her husband, she's got her fucking accounts wide open and everything like that. And he's taking pictures and shit. So it's obvious that he's the knuckle dragger who fucking hacked into her stuff and stole the money. But you can tell here, though, that this is where Tyler does not have any real life experience with any kind of office or money job, or even consulted anyone about it. Because if they think that you're embezzling money, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, we found out you're embezzling money. We don't know where it went, so it's up to you to give it back. Goodbye. You have 24 hours to give that back. Like, no, they're going to keep you on there to find out exactly where that money is going to before they fire you. And then once they know where that money is going, they're arresting you and throwing you in jail. They're not just going to let you go to give you a head start if you want to escape with that money. Like, that shit doesn't happen, dude. She ends up going to the bank to kind of track things down, get things in order, and she finds out that there's a mortgage taken out, her bank accounts have been cleared out, people signed fraudulent documents, which were notarized. And, I mean, that doesn't seem too realistic either, because if you're doing, like, high withdrawals and shit like that, and taking out a second mortgage, like, the bank is going to communicate with you somehow. It's not just going to be out the blue. There's got to be some kind of warning in place there. So, again, she's surprised Pikachuing all over the place, and it's like, oh, you did it. So she confronts Shannon, Grace confronts Shannon, and He's like, yeah, I fucking did it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Ha 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 ha. More ha 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 ha. And then later we get the infamous ashtray bitch scene, which is fucking hilarious. I mean, the situation's not hilarious and it shouldn't be hilarious, but just the way Tyler presents this all makes it pretty fucking hilarious. Even though it's such a serious situation, it should not be laughable. But Tyler Perry is incompetent, so there we have it. So anyway, we get to the trial and it turns into this little trial or whatever. Lawyer girl is having cop husband look into some things or whatever. The trial is a disaster because it's the first case she ever tried. She's so incompetent that instead of recalling Grace's friend Sarah, who has been very close to the investigation and who was the one pushing Grace to even date this man in the first place, instead of recalling her in the first place, she rests the case, and then she tries to recall her as a witness because that went so terribly wrong, and she ends up being thrown in the clinger for contempt. Grace ends up being convicted as guilty, and at the last moment she noticed that Sarah was wearing a necklace that Shannon was, and it all clicks that Sarah was involved. She was involved and they were working together. But to back up a little bit, there was no body found at the scene because Grace took a fucking baseball bat and smashed the shit out of Shannon's head, which you would think would kill him, but apparently not. When Lawyer Girl goes to go check up on Sarah after a few days to be like, oh, I'm sure she's hurting too. Let me go check up on her. Cicely Tyson, who is in the movie for reasons, she comes hobbling down the street. And it's like, I'm trying to go home. And Lawyer Girl's like, yeah, we'll get you home. And Cicely Tyson's like, no, don't make me go back there. No, that's not my home. My home is 298 Sycamore, which was mentioned towards the middle of the film where we find out that that's the notary place where apparently these documents were notarized for Grace to take out a mortgage and all this other shit. And then it clicks with Lawyer Girl that Miss Sarah is fucking involved. So there's like rattling and shit. And Lawyer Girl, instead of calling the cops, decides to play Scooby-Doo and investigate. And she finds a bunch of women chained down there. And then fucking, Miss Sarah and Shannon are down there and like, hey, got you, bitch. You're not leaving because we can't let you be leaking this. And this man is fine. He's just got like a few bandages on his head. No black eyes or anything like that. And the way I tell you, Grace in the movie like fucking like whacked his head in, you would think he'd be dead. Or at least paralyzed or in a coma or some shit. Some kind of damage, but nah, he's just got a few bandages on his head. Because apparently being hit with a baseball bat does nothing. Anyway, cop husband is in the middle of a bust or whatever, arresting someone, and I guess he ran prints or something that lawyer had given him, and someone back at the police station was, you gotta get a look at this, and it shows that Miss Sarah was a fraudster. She was taking people's checks and shit like that, and so he leaves this man that he handcuffed out in the wild. He's like, don't move. And then he goes to rush over to his wife's aid. He knocks on the door. He's like, hey, is my wife here? And, Miss Sarah's like, no, she's not. But he ends up doing something smart and calling his wife's cell phone. It rings in Miss Sarah's house. So he busts down the door, mind you, without waiting for backup, and goes to arrest her. So he cuffs her, Miss Sarah, and he's like, you stay put. And of course she ain't staying put. She hobbled her ass with those handcuffs right out the door. So anyway, he finds his wife in the basement with these other women. Shannon gets shot to death and Grace ends up being acquitted. And then at the end it's kind of dramatic where Grace is leaving the courtroom and the reporter asked, are you happy it's over? And she's like, oh, it's not over. And then there's a flash to a scene of Miss Sarah saying how she loves to take care of elderly people, and she's had lots of experience with it, basically conning another one. And the movie kind of ends there. But it was a train wreck. I personally enjoyed it because it was so bad, but I mean, you just can't be. I don't know what Tyler Perry's thinking. There's just no growth for him as a writer. And every time he tries to do something dramatic, like, it always ends up being a mess. Temptation was a mess. Acrimony, I heard, was a mess. I never watched that. But from the reviews I've seen and heard, it's a mess. I don't know what Tyler Perry's thinking. Like, I truly don't. It's kind of ironic the film is called A Fall from Grace, because Tyler Perry is clearly taking a literal fall from grace. No one's really, except for, no disrespect, but mostly older people, mostly, church folk, are the ones who are still backing him and supporting him. Younger people who aren't exactly religious, are starting to get wise to him and starting to see the problematic messages in his movie, just the lack of care. I don't want to completely dog Tyler Perry, because he has done some good. He's given opportunity to lots of actors who may not have necessarily have gotten opportunity, donated money to certain causes, like opening up, I believe, an LGBTQ youth center, and he did build himself up from, the bottom up with his stage productions. He put those on all by himself. He lifted himself up out of being homeless to having his own kind of studio now, which lots of productions use. So that's a big accomplishment. I don't think those things should be discredited, but at the same time, it's like, well, what have you done lately? How have you uplifted other people lately? What kind of opportunities have you given to other people? Why do you have this big ass studio where you have lots of toys and gadgets and wonderful sets if you're not going to fully use them? Why do you have all these resources if you're going to work for as cheaply as possible for a lesser quality product and then to just reap all the profits you can? Why are you not investing back into that? I don't think Tyler Perry cares for the community as much as he says he does, because if that's the case, he would be giving more opportunity to other Black and POC voices, aside from, just giving them acting jobs, and some of them don't even excel to larger levels. And it just makes me kind of sad, because the actress who plays Grace, this was her first lead role. She had other roles. Like I said, she was in The Heat of the Night, the TV show, so she does have experience, but this was her first lead role. And for her first lead role to be in a production that was so cheaply done, was honestly, could be considered a joke. People are laughing about it. Like, it's gotta be disheartening to be given this opportunity and trying to make the best of it, but not being given the full environment which you could thrive and succeed in it. And it's just really sad. It makes me sad for her. It makes me sad for the other actors involved. The acting wasn't bad for most of them, like Lawyer Girl and Perry, because he always has to insert himself in, and Cop Husband. They were the weak links to me. Everyone else did a fair job. Everyone else did pretty well, honestly, especially with the material they were given. But it's just such a shame that such talent was not being fully utilized, because, again, the tools they were given to achieve the job that they were supposed to do. And it just makes me wonder what Tyler Perry's true intentions are. I think that he's pretty self-serving as long as he's making a buck. And it's quantity over quality, clearly, because he's pushing out all these scripts, all these shows. He's shooting things so fast, turning things around so fast, without really much consideration or care into the content and into the production value, that he's just trying to amass all this wealth. But what is that for? Where is that going to? What's the point of having a pile of money if you don't do anything with it? At that point, you're just a fucking dragon hoarding riches. Reinvest into the community in which you're supposed to be serving. Reinvest in your craft. Reinvest in bringing on new talent that could help you, new voices that could bolster your reputation as not only a filmmaker or a director, but as a writer and producer. Why have all these expensive gadgets if you're not going to use them? If you let other people use them, sure, but like, why have them if you can't put that towards your own work? It's really disappointing to see what's happened with Tyler Perry. I think he had a lot of potential and he just kind of squandered it once he started to get big and was like, hey, I can make a quick buck. I have a dedicated fan base, and no matter what I do, this fan base is going to stick with me. And I think that's pretty shitty. That's a disservice to not only his fan base, but to the staff working with him, to the actors, and, to the networks that are airing his stuff. So it's just really disheartening. And I would like to say, hey, maybe he'll turn over a new leaf after all this ridicule. But I doubt he will, because he seems very set and, oh, well, these are just haters. I don't care what everyone else says because they're just haters. And they're not haters, Tyler. They're just trying to help you improve your craft, improve what you're doing. No one wants to see you fail, but when you act like your shit don't stink, that there's nothing that you can do to improve or learn, then of course, like, everyone's going to shit on you and give up on you. The fan base that you have now, I'll be honest, it's older. They're not going to be around forever to sustain you. You have to get younger people to start to enjoy your work, to feel you, to understand you, to want to be a part of what you're doing. And not a lot of younger contemporary audiences are clicking with Tyler, so it's going to be a point where he's going to have to either adapt or he's going to fall off, and I think he'll just fall off. But he may adapt because he seems like the type of person that, like I said, is a dragon hoarding riches. I think he'll do whatever he has to do in order to make that coin. But with all that being said, let me know what you think about Tyler Perry, A Fall from Grace, anything that we talked about in this video. Sorry it's kind of long and rambly, but the movie is long and rambly and a mess, so hope you guys understand. I will see you next time. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.